I recorded my terrifying night shift stories, but something sinister yapped back at me. I never should have opened that door. I still see it in my mind, that flimsy door, peeling paint, whispering secrets at the edge of my reality. I was just another night shift worker, clocking hours at the old convenience store on the corner. The hum of the fluorescent lights overhead always made me uneasy. They flickered occasionally, as if reminding me I wasn't the only presence in that empty space. Most nights were routine. I destocked the chips, rearranged the candy, listening to the soft thrum of the fridge, that almost comforting sound. But as the hours crawled, dread began to settle in my gut. Shadows danced in the corners. Cold drafts slipped under the door, brushing against my skin like icy fingers. I glanced towards the back room, where storage crates loomed silent sentinels watching my every move. The silence was thick, almost suffocating, then came the whispers, faint at first. I thought it was the wind sneaking through the cracks, but no, it was more sinister than that. It was as if the very walls were murmuring secrets. I shook my head, trying to shake off the creeping panic. My heart raced, sweat prickled at my temples, and I rubbed my palms against my jeans, trying to ground myself. Just the wind, I told myself, but things didn't stay quiet for long. I heard the clatter of something shifting in the back room. Frozen, I stared at the door at the end of the aisle. The one I never wanted to approach. My breath caught in my throat. It sounded like someone or something was moving. I stepped closer, my heart beat a drum in my ears. The flickering lights cast eerie shadows, warping reality. My fingers trembled as I reached for the doorknob. Just a peek, I thought. Just a glimpse. The handle was cool under my touch. I could feel a chill seep into my bones. I twisted it slowly. The door creaked open, revealing nothing but darkness. An abyss waiting to swallow me whole, that S when I heard it. A growl. Low and guttural. Not an animal, something far more intelligent. Something that knew I was there. The darkness seemed to pulsate, inviting me to step further into its depths. I staggered back, breathless, dread clawing at my insides. And then it happened. A flash of movement. A figure darted across the shadows. My heart skipped, and a scream clawed its way up my throat. I slammed the door shut, trapping whatever it was behind that flimsy barrier. Silence fell, thick and oppressive. I could hear my own ragged breathing, the chill of fear palpable in the air. But as I leaned against the door, I felt the thud. 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 It was coming for me. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The oppressive silence stretched on, heavier than before, wrapping itself around me like a suffocating shroud. My heart thumped viciously against my ribcage, a prisoner demanding release. I stumbled backward, desperately trying to distance myself from the door, but it held me captive. Thud. 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 The sound transformed into an insistent rhythm, as if whatever lay behind was drumming its fingers in impatience, teasing me with the dark unknown. I cast a frantic glance around the store, praying for a reason to continue my vigil without further confrontation. Yet the shelves lined with snacks and beverages offered no comfort, no safety. They merely stood as an audience to my growing unraveling. The air had turned thick, brimming with an electric tension. For each flicker of the lights overhead, shadows elongated in mocking gestures, twisting like serpents in the dimness. My breath quickened. I needed to distract myself. With shaky hands, I reached for my phone, its screen illuminating my trembling face. I knew rationality was slipping through my fingers, but I sought the comfort of something familiar, my recorded stories, the only remnant of sanity left. I can do this, I whispered to myself, half-heartedly. But when I plugged in my earbuds and pressed play, the whispers morphed into syncopated echoes. My own voice told tales of terror from that very store, yet now layered within them was an unearthly resonance that darkened the narratives, extracting their essence into something unrecognizable. Suddenly, a pained yowl split the air, clawing its way into my ears. I ripped the earbuds out, the world swallowing the noise. Goosebumps fled up my arms, and I fought to compose myself. The ebbs and flows of guttural growls became clearer now, filling spaces between my thoughts. It was as if the creature behind the door began to articulate, weaving words heavy with malice. I had awakened it, driven by an irrational urge. I stepped forward, pressing my ear against the door while the thuds receded into an ominous stillness. My breath hitched as I felt an unexpected warmth radiate through the wood, a heartbeat, muffled yet insistent, like an animal entrapped and desperate. I had to know. Yanking the door open, I stumbled into the inky darkness beyond, uncertainty sending electric jolts down my spine. The darkness was palpable, thick as syrup, and the hairs on the back of my neck prickled with an instinctive warning. The back room smelled of decay, of something left too long unnoticed. As my eyes raced to adjust that, I took an unsteady step forward, heart hammering as I peered deeper into the void ahead. Just as my eyes caught the faint outline of a figure slumped against the wall, clothed in tattered rags, skin stretched taut over bone, an icy breath slipped past my ear, whispering my name. Help me! Fear turned my insides into icy knots as I pulled back, stumbling blindly in retreat. But the moment I turned, the door slammed shut behind me, locking me in this purgatory of shadow and whisper. Chaos erupted as I clawed at the door, desperation surging through me. Let me out! I screamed, my voice echoed back at me, and the whispers grew louder, surrounding me like a tempest. In the corner of my eye, movement, the creature, now free from the chains of my perception, emerged. Glowing eyes bore into mine, reflecting an abyss of broken promises. The mouth parted and from it spilled a cacophony of tortured souls, begging, pleading as one, a symphony of anguish intertwined with a single sentiment that pierced me with dread. Join us in that terrifying moment. The lights above shattered, showering glass like deadly raindrops. Stumbling under the weight of my instinctual terror, I turned to escape, but there stood the figure, now closer, its hand reaching out, a cracked smile stretched over lips too wide, glistening with something that reflected the flicker of my fading hope. That I and the chaos. I froze, realization dawning upon me that door was never meant to keep something in, it was meant to keep me out, and I was already too late. The room spun as I struggled to find my footing. Confusion and terror wrestled within me, but instinct kicked in, propelling me toward the grisly figure that loomed just beyond reach. Its ghastly smile twisted further, a grotesque invitation, the air thickening with a suffocating stench of rot and despair. Join us! The voice hissed again, a shattering blend of tones that sent shivers racing down my spine. The shadows around it pulsated, almost alive, writhing as if awaiting my demise. I turned to confront the door, but the darkness felt heavier now, sticky like a web designed to ensnare. My fingers grazed the cool surface, searching for an escape that seemed impossible. Why are you doing this? I gasped, spinning back to face the thing in the corner. What do you want from me? The figure's eyes glinted with malice, each blink revealing the faintest glimpse of the countless souls trapped within. A chorus of mournful wails rose in a chilling crescendo, each note striking a chord of despair that resonated deep in my chest. I lifted my hands, palms facing out, trembling in defiance as if that would draw a line of safety. I can help you. I shouted, grasping at straws, desperate for an understanding that eluded me. Perhaps if I bared my soul, they would spare me. But the response was an unsettling chuckle that reverberated through the room like a funeral dirge. Its outstretched hand shuddered, the long fingers twitching as they beckoned. Surrounded by an oppressive carnival of shadows, I realized the truth. This was not a sincere plea for aid. It was a seduction into madness. With a surge of adrenaline, I jerked my body to the side and sprinted toward an adjacent room, the tangible darkness clawing at my back. The air turned icy. The cries grew louder, each one wrapping around me like sinewy tendrils, constricting in tight. Terrified, I swiveled to glance back. The figure had followed, gliding soundlessly, a ghoulish spectre that thrived on fear. That I burst into a smaller chamber cluttered with broken shelves and ancient merchandise, the remnants of what seemed like a forgotten world. Dust motes danced grotesquely in the meager shafts of light, illuminating remnants of nightmares caught in time. I stumbled over an overturned box, my heart racing wildly as I fought to regain my footing. Rummaging through the debris, I spotted something that felt familiar, a forgotten tape recorder, its surface worn and dirty. Heart racing anew, I snatched it up, my mind racing as I wrestled with the barest glimmer of hope. I'd used a similar device before. Maybe I could capture their voices, expose them to the world, but the deeper reality gnawed at me. These voices were not meant to be recorded, they wanted to be heard. Just then, a loud crack echoed from the doorway I'd forsaken, followed by a low, guttural growl that vibrated through the air, causing the loose fragments around me to tremble. A grotesque shadow, darker than the all-consuming night, loomed behind me. I dared a glance. The figure slinked forward, its essence merging with the shadows that shifted and undulated toward me, blocking any hope of escape. No more games, it rasped, a grim harmony of countless whispers entwining into one, drawing tighter around me. Just take me. I blurted, the truth spilling out in a desperate admission, realizing that to confront whatever this was would either destroy me or set me free. I won't resist. I belong to the night. For an instant, the figure faltered, the fractured grin wavering with uncertainty. It tilted its head, as if pondering my words, the wails diminishing to mere echoes. But just when I hoped I could break the spell, the room darkened visibly, plunging me into a world without light. The recorder slipped from my grasp, hitting the floor with a resounding crack. The shadows swirled and coiled, as the voices within it were abruptly silenced. In that decrepit moment, fear overcame me, and everything fell to black. Then, I heard laughter, a cacophony of it, rattling my bones. It danced along the edges of my consciousness, promising despair and beckoning me deeper. The floor beneath my feet began to tremble, the sounds morphing into something more sinister, gnarled laughter seeping through the walls like a swarm of bees. Join us, they whispered, warmth seeping from the shadows, and despite my frantic heartbeat, I felt an odd yearning to submit. A sudden realization crept in. It wasn't just the souls imprisoned here, it was the awakening of something ancient that had fed off fear long before I had ever stepped into this forsaken place. Then the world ruptured, the shadows morphing into streaks of darkness that enveloped me. Devoid of light, time blurred, a twisted doorway opening before me in the pitch void. Something was waiting there, ready to reveal the horrors I'd always run from. And as the malevolent laughter crescendoed, I found myself stepping forward, ensnared, no longer able to choose. And then, I felt the cold grip of countless hands taking hold of my arms, pulling me closer to the event horizon of dark oblivion. Welcome home. All at once, I was wrenched from the void, broken shards of reality crashing against me like sharp ice. I gasped for breath, the air slicing through my lungs as I surged to sit up. It took a moment for my surroundings to pull into focus, but when they did, I found myself back in the room of shadows, a perfect, mocking replica of where I'd been, suffocating with a familiar dread that made my skin crawl. Every corner was a shade darker, a sickly amalgamation of despair nestled within the corners of the ceiling, dripping like thick tar. I recoiled, wrapping my arms around my torso, every instinct screaming to flee. There was an oppressive weight, as if I had crossed a threshold I never intended to breach. Welcome home echoed through the stillness, a sickly sweet melody laced with poison, sowing itself into the fabric of my mind. Desperation ignited as I clawed at the floor, feeling the splintered wood bite back against my fingers and palms, yet I couldn't sense any windows or doors. Only walls that seemed to breathe, pulsing gently, like a heart that long ago ceased to beat. With a sudden jolt, I remembered the tape recorder, the only ally I thought I had in this hellish trap, yet it was nowhere to be seen. Panic surged like a tidal wave, flooding my thoughts with despair. No. Not like this. I choked, my voice barely a whisper against the swelling darkness that I clawed at the air, seeking something tangible, but there remained only whispers lapping at my senses. Join us. urged the haunting choir, now distinctly layered young, old, male, female. Each voice sharper than the last, each lament intertwining, clawing for recognition, begging for release. Suddenly, a figure emerged at the far end of the room, its shape roiling like smoke in a dying fire. I squinted against the melding shadows, the form becoming clearer, a shifting gait, grasping hands twitching before a ghastly, hollow face that was eerily familiar. I staggered back, recognition churning my stomach. It was a face I knew from childhood, a neighbor who had gone missing, a woman consumed by urban legends and hushed warnings. Lila? I gasped, but the name felt like ash on my tongue. She smiled, her features grotesquely contorted, admiration spilling from her gaze like desolation flooding a broken dam. "Stay with us," she cooed, the timbre of her voice cold and resonant, amplifying the chaos thrumming in my chest. "You can escape, just give in to the night." "No. You're not real," I shouted in defiance, shaking my head as the walls echoed my despair back at me. "You can't trap me like this." I stumbled, desperate to run again, only to find myself rooted, the floor beneath shifting, as if becoming a ravenous mouth threatening to swallow me whole. Lila's form began to ripple and fracture, countless faces emerging from her dark form, each one mounting a relentless onslaught of sorrow. I shrieked at the grotesque display, a tangible horror, rushing energy surging through the cacophony of distorted voices, drawing on my deepest fears. "I was never meant to be here," I cried, backing against a wall that pulsed like a living thing, expelling unyielding waves of darkness, but the more I resisted, the stronger the shadows became, coiling tighter around me, each tendril whispering my name, beckoning, wrapping around my limbs like chains forged from despair. I struggled against their grasp, but the weight of their collective sorrow bore down upon me, extinguishing my defiance. My heart raced, each beat a countdown to my end, a splintering crack of dread. Then, like a tempest within a storm, I felt it brewing, rising from the depths of my soul, the desire to shatter the chains that bound me. "I want to be one of you," I screamed, the rawness of my voice carving through the chaos, a desperate spark igniting within. Suddenly, the darkness recoiled, Lila's form flickering like a misaligned projection, her mocking laughter morphing into shrieks of agony. In an instant, the multitude of faces swirled into a kaleidoscope of horrors, each one pleading and parading before me, all desperate echoes of lost lives and shattered dreams. Then, a rift, thin as a hairline, appeared in the center of the room, emitting a phosphorescent glow. "Step through, or be taken." Lila howled, the others crying out in unison, the ground beneath vibrating shockingly as if rebelling against the very presence of the darkness consuming it. "The choice is yours." Caught between the abyss of despair and an uncertain light, my heartbeat pounded painfully in my ears. The specters lunged once more, the laughter of the damned engulfing me as I prepared to leap into the unknown, but before I could make my choice, an unseen force yanked me back, slamming me into the wall, and the faces dissipated into a frenzy of shrieks. The light beckoned, but before I could dive into its promise, a hand shot through the rift, grasping my wrist with a grip of death, pulling me toward the yawning void, the fragments of tormented souls shrieking in vindictive joy. "Welcome home," the voice hissed again, echoing deep into the unfathomable darkness as I felt myself teetering on the precipice of annihilation. My gaze clamped tightly on that light, now flickering, extinguishing like a dying star, and in that moment, terror turned to realization. I was not just destined to join them, a primal part of me desired it, a hunger that clawed at the edges of my resolve. I had to decide. The darkness laughed in my ear, taunting me with its whispered promises, and as the rift widened, all I could do was wonder, was this the end of the nightmare, or a brand new beginning? The shadows crept closer, drawing upon the last vestiges of light staining the edges of the rift. My heart thudded a frantic rhythm as I dangled between infernal edges. That hand clenched tighter, the sensation seeping bone-deep, a cold inevitability, an echo of the countless others drawn to their fate. "Let go," I hissed through gritted teeth as raw panic surged, electric and alive. The word sounded foreign on my tongue, a rebellion I could barely afford. "I don't belong to you." Lila's laughter reverberated like cracked glass, shattering any remnants of hope. "We belong to each other now," she crooned, her form stretching across the threshold of the rift, eyes glinting like sharpened knives. To deny it is the true torment. Come with us where suffering knows no bounds, embrace the inevitable. Their whispers intertwined, a grotesque serenade filled with promises of forgetting and surrender. I was teetering on the edge, both oddly tempted and dreadfully aware of where that path might lead. Yet, the tension inside me wrangled with a more severe hesitation. Glancing at the shrinking light, my resolve solidified. I wasn't ready to relinquish everything. With a guttural roar, I yanked against the grip, feeling something within me snapping, like taut skin breaking free. My knees buckled as I surged forward, the clawing hand losing purchase. With an adrenaline-fueled leap, I threw myself toward the intruding light, desperate for salvation amidst the equilibrium of despair. As I plunged into the radiance, a violent force threw me back against the cold floor, the warmth of the light dissipating like a flame snuffed out suddenly in the night's breath. An invisible weight bore down upon me, pushing the breath from my lungs as surrounding chaos clawed at my senses. I gasped, lost in the churning tumult. Whispers rose to agonized screams, the reality around me distorting into a vile parody. "Forsake it!" came Lila's voice, now layered with shrieks from dozens of throats, rising and falling like an ominous tide. "You cannot escape us." I fought against the suffocating pressure, forcing myself to stand amidst the shifting shadows, littered with remnants of screams, past fragments etched into the air that swirled with menacing glee. With nowhere to run, I squinted into the fleeting light, where a figure lingered just beyond the veil. "Help me," I croaked, uncertainty twisting my voice, uncertainty which only seemed to drench my plea in darkness. The figure flickered, a head crowned with twisted locks, swathed in a shroud of light and shadow. "It's too late," it murmured, the voice almost sweet, but underscored by dread. I recognized it, another lost soul, lingering just at the fringes of their torment, reflecting my own swirling fears. My instincts screamed to shun it, but the disorientation pressed down harder, forcing me into a moment of vulnerability. "Join them, embrace your fate," it cooed, the ghostly face shifting in color and texture, splintering and coalescing into something I once cherished. A surge of terror gripped me, familiarity twisting into horror. "Not like this!" I shouted, knowing now that beneath that semblance was something far more malignant, something that served the shadows. The shadowy throng surged forward, each entity clawing for my essence, their breaths cold and damp like the mists of buried memories. There's no choice left. They cried, their chants resonating in collective agony. And as the figure disappeared, the darkness surged in, monstrous mouth stretching wider as I stood frozen. Before my eyes, Lila and the others united, transforming into a grotesque mass of sinewed limbs and eyes that stared into my soul, their hollow gazes igniting an insatiable fear that coursed like ice in my veins. But amidst their chant, one voice rose above the din: "You promised." A realization ignited within me. A sliver of memory played like a ghostly reel, long-forgotten oaths whispered in the delirium of sleepless nights, a keening desire to uncover the truth. The essence of the darkness longed to reclaim the one who dared to oppose it, and all that. Fear combined with an ancient instinct erupted from the depths. Suddenly, I surged forth, breaking the compulsion constraining me, my scream trailing in the air. "I will find a way." The ground shook violently beneath me, another rift flaring open, a swirling vortex threatening to pull the entire realm apart. But just then, a chasm yawned, a crack of blinding light bursting forth, and from it emerged a voice crystal clear amidst the tumult: "Stop running." I hesitated, locking eyes with the menacing figure of Lila, whose influence loomed larger than the night. With her spectral hand extended, she whispered, "Join us, and perhaps, just perhaps, you might reclaim all that you've lost." The shadows watched with eager dread, amplifying the weight of her offer, each heartbeat drumming a forbidden rhythm throughout the room. Clinging to stillness, I felt the weight of my decision crashing down. An eternal struggle stretched before me like a treacherous road, and then, as my mind reeled and the darkness closed in, something primal surged inside me, a fierce determination refusing to succumb. I did not want to become another lost soul. But as I looked into the rifting light, I knew my choices lay clothed in darkness. Will you forsake the darkness for the hollow promise of light? Lila asked, each word like a stroke of malicious intent against the dying twilight. And in that moment, the walls heaved and strained, the shadows screaming in agony. The choice rested for me like a thundering gale, and then the rift imploded, the room folding into a singularity of torment, claiming everything in its insatiable hunger. As I was engulfed, that chilling whisper slid through the air, the defining cry of a new beginning, welcome home. The moment the rift imploded, the world fractured into a cascade of colors and sounds that twisted into a nightmarish chaos. I felt the force of the void pulling at the very core of my being, ripping apart the fabric of reality around me. Darkness swallowed the light completely, and any sense of direction vanished. The air felt thick and acrid, reeking of sulfur and decay, igniting a primal fear that clawed at my throat, that I was weightless for an eternity, suspended in a liminal space where time lost all meaning. Shapes flickered at the edges of my consciousness, distorted faces grinned stretched too wide, eyes glowing with a ravenous hunger. They moved towards me like a wave of shadows, and I screamed, though no sound emerged. Then, in a sudden crash as sharp as glass shattering, I was pulled back into a semblance of reality. I landed on damp earth, shivering. My surroundings morphed rapidly. Now I was in the forest, yet it felt wrong, twisted like a reflection in a murky pond. The trees loomed taller than any I had ever seen, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal hands, ready to ensnare me. A sickening sense of being watched settled over me, bones prickling under the weight of invisible stares. Lila! I shouted, but my voice was swallowed as if the very air conspired to silence me. What had begun as an echoing call now morphed into the whispers of the shadows themselves, mocking and taunting me. Come play with us. The whispers danced around me, mischievous laughter intertwining with murmurs of dread. I stumbled through the underbrush, paranoia surging. The moon hung high and fat, casting an eerie light over the twisted landscape, but the shadows beneath the trees seemed to stretch infinitely deeper, calling to me in a sonorous sigh. I could almost see the faces of those lost, their features flickering in and out like ghosts trapped between realms. A sudden rustling broke the uneasy stillness, and I whirled around, heart racing, eyes wide. The world felt thin, as if it could tear apart at any moment, and in that fragile stillness, I sensed something moving, a presence lurking just beyond the veil of perception. Help me! A voice wailed in the distance, sounding eerily familiar. My heart sank as recognition blossomed, a hollow echo of my own. I took a step back, unsure which direction to head. The path ahead twisted into darkness before me, but behind me, the voice lingered, a plea twisted into despair. As if sensing my hesitance, the voice transformed into a chorus of cries, each overlapping with a frantic urgency. They're coming for you. Panic shoved me into motion. I sprinted through the trees, branches slashing against my skin, clawing at my shirt, leaving behind traces of warmth in the clarity of night. The deeper I delved, the more aware I became of the eyes watching from the confines of the dense undergrowth, chewing away at my resolve. Suddenly, my foot caught on something, and I tumbled into a clearing, landing hard against the cold earth. The moonlight poured down like icy water, illuminating an altar, a stone slab, old and stained with the residue of ancient ritual. I could sense it pulsating with dark energy, an invitation and a warning woven into one. Above the altar, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was a woman, her skin shimmering under the moonlight, but her face was obscured with a mask of twisting essences, shifting and contorting, ever elusive. Are you so desperate to chase the light? She whispered, her voice a serpentine hiss that curled through the air. You carry the burden of choice, but that choice is a shackle. You are bound to the darkness, little moth. My breathing quickened as she drew nearer, her hands moving gracefully. I could sense the pull of her energy, a mercurial nature that promised power but whispered of betrayal. The faces of the lost flickered behind her, laughing and wailing, a cacophony of despair that reverberated through my mind. Join us, or become the hunted, she said, a chilling smile emerging from the shadows of her mask. What once was your home is a prison now, but there are ways to adapt. As she spoke, the earth trembled with anticipation. The shadows began to swirl and coalesce, rising from the depths in sharp, slashing motions, their figures sharpening into grotesque forms, familiar faces now twisted into masks of anguish. "Join us!" they screamed, their voices layered over each other, a haunting melody with no escape, a unison that promised despair and birthright. That I staggered back, something ancient clawing within, fighting to emerge. Desperation pushed me forward. I felt the weight of choice crushing down like the hand of fate itself, suffocating me in uncertainty. But before I could react, the sky itself cracked and split as another rift opened, glowing brilliantly and terrifyingly bright, pouring in waves of warmth that felt like despair reincarnate. "Make your choice!" the woman shrieked, the howl of lost souls seizing my heart. And as the ground trembled and shadows converged, I understood, for the first time, the magnitude of my peril, an unending cycle of terror turning at the edges of my sanity. In the throes of desperation, I reached out for either darkness or light, but just then, the shadows lunged forward, grasping, clawing all at once. Both offers were within my grasp. "Welcome home!" they roared, voices intertwining in hellish harmony. The night enveloped me, and the rift surged, darkness and light colliding, ready to consume whatever lingered within. Then everything went black. Coldness seeped into my bones, a numbing haze that dulled my senses. As the darkness wrapped around me, time became a fickle entity, stretching endlessly. Struggling against the weight of nothingness, I became acutely aware of the sounds that began to emerge, slithering whispers that weaved their way through the void. They curled around me, calling softly at first, but then escalating into desperate, tortured cries that clawed at my sanity. "Wake up! Wake up!" The familiar voice, caught in a ghastly echo, was my own. I flinched as terror coursed through me like venom, realizing it was not my consciousness thrumming through the void, but something else, something wretched intertwined with my fate. The inky abyss began to lift as a murky twilight seeped in. I felt warmth on my skin, not the tranquil embrace of the sun, but the suffocating heat of weaving tendrils, prepared to ensnare me. A dim light flickered to life, revealing glimmers of a forest that mirrored the hell from which I had escaped. The trees towered overhead, their bark slick with an oily sheen, and roots sprawled outward like veins, throbbing against the pulse of the earth. "Help us!" words hung in the air like festering wounds. The voices were alive, a cacophony of the damned, swirling around me, laced with an insistent pull that urged me deeper into the woods, closer to the heart of their torment. Struggling to rise to my feet, I peered into the mist coiling around my ankles, feeling its chill gnaw at my resolve. As I lumbered forward, desperation driving my every step, fragments of memories surfaced, faces, names, laughter, all contorted into nightmare versions of themselves. Lila's voice summoned me again, drifting toward me like a lost breeze. I was drawn to it, feeling the weight of the bond that anchored me to her. "Please, get away," I pleaded under my breath, but the whispers drowned out my thoughts. "Sacrifice," they hissed, worming their way into my mind. "Your love for Lila, it can save you or doom you." A branch cracked behind me, an omen sharp enough to pierce the haze. I spun around, heart hammering against my ribs as shadows crept out from the underbrush, their shapes rippling with malice. They formed into indistinct figures, faces I couldn't quite recognize, blurs of anxiety and pain erupting through the dim light. They reached for me, their cold fingers grasping at the edges of my consciousness. "Run," I urged myself, but even my own voice felt foreign within this realm distorted by pain. Panic consumed me, lurching forward as the shadows closed and ungainly limbs stretched in unnatural harmony, smiling, yet their eyes glowed with an unholy hunger. Deeper into the woods, the whispers turned to shrieks, rising into a frenzied crescendo. "Feed us! Feed us!" they clamored, the fear swelling in my throat as I stumbled over roots and loose stones, desperately trying to escape their frigid embrace. The trees around me seemed to twist and turn, bending under the strain of their cries, almost as if they too were urging me to resist. Suddenly, I emerged into a clearing, the ground uneven and soft beneath my feet that squelched with every hurried step. The night sky stretched wide above, stars blurred, flickering like dying flames. At the center stood a figure draped in darkness, her mask of shifting horrors had transformed, now a grotesque grin split her face in two. "Would you bring her to me?" She beckoned, her voice dripping with a blend of promises and threats. I felt her power pulsating, thrumming in time with the leaping shadows that erupted from behind her, forming into nightmarish creatures moaning with desperation. Don't listen to her. Lila rose within my mind, her voice steady, unwavering. You must fight. In that moment, dread coiled tighter around me, paralyzing my will. The echoes of my love wove into the night, battling against the universal pull of emptiness, the stories told around flickering firelight unwoven before me into a vivid nightmare. I saw visions passing through my mind, the laughter we shared, the warmth of her hand fitting perfectly in mine, all smudged into a palette of grief. You're too late, the woman hissed, the shadows writhing at her command. The ones you lost, they inhabit this realm now. You can join them, you can escape this pain. Sinking to my knees, I felt my heart thundering on the brink of collapse. The warmth of hope slipped away, replaced by despair that enveloped me like a heavy fog. No. Lila. I won't abandon you. I screamed, but the echoes reverberated hollow, swallowed by the dark abyss surrounding us. The shadows encroached closer, stretching their elongated hands toward my very essence. It felt like a tangible tether, an inevitable grip, pulling me toward the depths of some unknown fate. But I stood, not wanting to be extinguished, feeling the weight of every lost soul around me, desperate for a semblance of freedom or companionship. Then, as if drawn by the very air I breathed, Lila's figure began to take shape among the chaos, emerging from the shadows like a fractured reflection. I could barely process it, the clarity slicing through the thick murkiness, but the sight of her made my breath catch, a chilling visage of someone I loved, yet twisted by sorrow. Help me, her voice melded with the whispers, resonating within the marrow of my bones. Just as my heart surged with hope, a shadow lunged with blinding speed, aiming for my heart, her heart, and I became frozen in the instant, caught between two worlds on the cusp of oblivion. The urge to shield her from the horrors surged so strongly it nearly shattered my will. In that fraught fraction of a moment when both love and terror collided, the night fractured anew, the light and shadows swirling violently. Join or die. They chanted, voices merging into a nightmarish chorus that threatened to consume everything I had ever known. Everything was about to change forever. Just then, Lila's form flickered, her eyes pleading, and I heard one final harrowing whisper, promising salvation or destruction. Choose. Before I could fully comprehend, an explosion of light shattered the darkness, and behind it, an echo resonated through my soul, make your choice. The rift gaped open, glowing, and within its depths, a roiling void beckoned. And with that, the gnarled branches lashed out at me, grasping for my very essence, and then I was falling again. As I plunged into the swirling abyss, the sensation of weightlessness enveloped me. But nothing could dull the bone-deep fear coursing through my veins. It was not merely a void I fell through, there was something else, something gnawing at the fringes of my awareness, whispering sweet, seductive lies that sought to ensnare my consciousness. The fall felt eternal, and for an instant, I glimpsed the flicker of light again, the promised rift shining brighter, taunting me with glimpses of safety, the kind I once knew. But beneath that surface, lurking just out of sight, lay shadows that whispered cruelly, you cannot escape. Not here. Not ever. With a violent jolt, I struck unyielding ground, the impact radiating through me like a shot of adrenaline laced with frost. It was a suffocating darkness that gripped me, a thick miasma that made each breath a battle against an unseen force constricting my very lungs. Gasping for air, my hands found the earth beneath me, slick and cold, a pulsing heartbeat of despair thrumming beneath my fingertips. That I pushed myself up, heart racing as I surveyed this new realm, banking shadows that danced rhythmically as if beckoning me further into their embrace. The barren landscape stretched endlessly, dotted with gnarled trees, their twisted branches reaching out like skeletal hands clawing at the sky. A low, guttural growl rippled through the air, sending shivers trickling down my spine. I froze, the instinctual drive to run locked in place as primal fear gripped my soul. Find her, a voice hissed from the darkness, echoing familiar whispers entwined in the malevolent symphony that vibrated around me. It was a command, urgent yet dripping with menace. Or forsake your purpose. I took a step forward, each movement deliberate, as though my body was a marionette controlled by strings woven of uncertainty. Lila. I bellowed, the name solidifying like steel upon my lips. But the emptiness swallowed it, laughing with the mockery of lost hope. Lila. Where are you? A rustling erupted from behind me, a cruel pang of dread snapping at my heels. I spun around swiftly, fear clawing its way up through my throat. The shadows converged, shifting and warping into forms indistinguishable from nightmares, writhing bodies half-formed and grotesque, blending into one another as if caught in an eternal embrace of suffering. My heart raced as they encircled me, filling the space with anguished wails, horrifying harmonies bubbling to the surface, a symphony of torment. Join us, they intoned, their words heavy with despair. You seek her. She is lost. We can alleviate your suffering. Shut up. I screamed, desperation fueling my resolve. I want to listen. Gripping my head, I felt the lines of sanity fray, each insistence coiling around me tighter, suffocating in its cruel intentions, but even as I cried out, I sensed a flicker far beyond the shadows, a soft glow amongst the encroaching dark. It flickered erratically, an echo of love that wrapped its shimmering arms around my heart, urging me to move, to fight through the darkness. Lila's laughter rang in my ears, sweet yet tinged with anguish. You can't give up. I turned, propelled toward the shimmering light that pulsed steadily, as if my soul could imprint on its warmth. The shadows twisted and howled as I fought against their grasping limbs, surging ahead with an indomitable spirit. I will find you, Lila. I will not let you remain lost. Tendrils lashed out with blinding speed, ensnaring my ankles and tugging me backward, their grasp scraping against my skin like icy claws. My heart raced as the urge to succumb warred with my determination. I want to let this happen. I shouted, planting my feet firmly into the ground, channeling my will. With one tremendous effort, I tore free from their grasp, lunging toward the light. The brilliance expanded before me, promising something beyond my grasp, a refuge, a reunion with the love I fought to protect. And just as I breached the boundary between light and shadow, time fractured again, and I became a spectator of my own horror. Lila. Caught in a cocoon of darkness, her figure flickering between existence and oblivion, twisted by shadows clawing at her form. Help me! She screamed, but the sound nosedived into the silence, a ghost lost beneath a haunting tide. I saw her trapped, tortured, a crystalline tear trailing down her cheek, reflecting the dim light as though it were hope contained in fragile glass. Lila. I reached out desperately, my fingers barely grazing the edge of her ethereal form, a portal of luminous hope struggling against the crushing weight of despair that bound her. But as I stretched forth, shadows swirled malevolently, consuming what little brightness seeped through. No. A voice erupted from my lips, but it no longer resembled my own. It was a distorted echo that amplified through the abyss, resounding with madness as the shadows clawed hungrily at my flesh, dragging me back from the precipice. No, I gasped, the darkness swirling more intensely. The shadows paraded my failures before my eyes, each taunt jarring me deeper into terror. You cannot save her. She belongs with us now. With a final, shattering scream, I broke free from their grasp, lunging forward into the shimmering light, clenching my fists around the remnants of hope swirling in my chest. My fingers brushed against Lila's essence just as the shadows recaptured me, dragging me beneath the surface. In that moment, as I sank deeper into the inky void, I remembered the last thing I would ever hear from her, her pained voice merging with the ethereal light, seeping into the corners of my fading consciousness. Choose. Or be lost forever. And then, as darkness enveloped me, I faced the unthinkable. The light shattered into fragments, and in the depths of that fracture echoed something chilling, something unfathomable. I recorded my terrifying night shift stories, but something sinister yapped back at me. The implication twisted a blade of dread through my heart, sealing my fate as my own voice started to whisper back at me, warped and dreadful, reflecting the truth I had feared most: you should never have come here. The last echo of my voice dissolved into the suffocating void, and a hysterical laugh bubbled up from somewhere deep within me, reverberating eerie and hollow. I had not just arrived in this realm, I had become a part of it. The shadows encircled my mind like a noose, squeezing tight until the last drops of resistance bled from my will. Yet, deep within the darkness, I felt a flicker of awareness. If Lila was here, somewhere trapped, I had to endure. My mind clawed at hope, like a moth drawn toward a flame. Suddenly, the ground beneath me shuddered as if alive. With each tremor came whispers riding on the air, menacing, insidious murmurings that twisted around my thoughts, stitching themselves into the fabric of my reality. Join us, embrace what you truly fear, they beckoned, seductive in their pull. The shadows seemed to nestle themselves with nostalgic familiarity, teasing memories long buried. Picking myself up mechanically, I stumbled forward, though the sinister atmosphere weighed heavily against my limbs. The terrain shifted beneath me, barren patches of earth blending seamlessly into opaque puddles of pitch-black liquid. Each step I took threatened to pull me into the obsidian void. Lila! Please! I cried out, urgency coursing through my veins. The echo of my desperation rolled away into the shadows, and in response, the ground seemed to buckle, revealing grotesque visages trapped within the dark ether, faces morphed in agony, imploring for release. A wave of nausea crashed over me as their haunted gazes locked onto mine, desperation clawing at my chest. Help us, an anguished voice wailed, a harmonizing chorus of torment wrapping around me, pulling at the thin strands of my sanity. Find her. We can guide you. My heart sank at the realization that their pleas mirrored my own fractured need to reach Lila. I took a cautious step back, instincts ignited by the primal urge to flee. But there was no escaping their siren call that echoed through the abyss. With their call came promises of forgotten truths and the pursuit of salvation. No. I want to listen. I shouted again, teeth clenched tight against their cacophony. Lila needs me. I balled my fists, channeling every thought toward breaking through the oppressive fog. Yet, the gloom wrapped tighter around me, pulsing with a life of its own. It whispered my fears back at me, of failing to save her, of being consumed by the darkness, of losing myself. Each word resonated as a torture of its own, amplifying the ache lodged in my chest. I fell into a fevered struggle against the dark whispers lapping at my mind, forcing memories to surface. The sound of her laughter, the feel of her hand slipping from mine on that fateful night. I could sense something shifting. The shadows briefly withdrew, offering momentary clarity, and I glimpsed a path leading away from the nightmarish chorus. Fueled by instinct, I staggered onward, desperate to find Lila before this nightmare consumed all remnants of her, before the darkness twisted her essence into something grotesque, just like the faces gleaming beneath the surface. As I rushed down the path illuminated by fleeting glimmers of light, the shadows began to writhe in protest, thickening in thorns and barbed tendrils reaching out to reclaim me. Then, just as I thought I might break free, a figure stumbled into the dim glow of my desperate vision, a shadow barely more than a whisper of a person. Help me! Came a raw, chilling voice that surged through the fabric of my mind, wrapping around my heart like a vice. The figure turned slowly, and something deep inside me screamed. It was not Lila, but rather a warped reflection of her, a specter with hollow eyes and lips drawn back in a morbid grin that sent shards of horror slicing through my reverie. Not her. I roared, dread spinning in my gut. Not Lila. Yet even as I shouted, another voice mingled in the darkness, a seductive whisper with that same melodious timbre I had come to cherish. You left me, remember? It echoed with a haunting cadence, a reminder of the fraying lines of our connection. My pulse thundered as I recognized the truth wrapped within the temptation of her call. Lila. I begged, desperation thickening my voice. Please, I'm here. I want to leave you again. But before I could comprehend the shifting shadows coiling around me, the false apparition merely laughed, deep, rolling laughter that threatened to drown my sanity. You should never have come here. This is where all fear resides, and it will consume you. A blinding pain shot through my chest, and I collapsed to my knees, the darkness encroaching again, swirling around me in violent eddies. As I fought to buoy myself against despair, just beyond the reach of my crumbling sanity, I caught sight of a light flickering in the distance, a beacon of hope that sent renewed strength coursing through my veins. With a gasp, I surged forward, but the twisted specter moved to block my path, its grin widening until shadows poured from its mouth, whispering my worst fears. You will never escape. Embrace your dread. And in that unbearable moment, I realized with a frigid grasp, I could no longer discern the truth from the horrors that had drawn me deep into their suffocating embrace. My heart raced, mind spiraling as I lunged toward the light and shouted her name one last time. But just as I leapt toward the flicker, the ground erupted beneath me, the darkness roaring in fury, dragging me into an eternal descent. I tumbled, spiraled deeper into the void, the laughter rising around me, echoing in a cacophony of despair. You cannot save her. You will become one of us. And as the last remnants of reality flickered out, engulfed by the relentless tide of shadows, yet another chilling realization chilled my bones. I was not alone. Something else was with me, something sinister and twisted, whispering soft secrets of oblivion in the dark. You should never have come here. I awoke once more, gasping for air as the chilling realization crystallized in the depths of my mind. This place, the twisted reflection of my own despair, was not merely a shadow realm, it thrummed with life, an entity that fed off the remnants of my shattered will. Each breath tasted of ash, each heartbeat a reminder of choices long bestowed upon me. As my vision bled back into clarity, I found myself on the familiar damp earth of the convenience store, the very place that had drawn me into this chaos. The flickering lights buzzed ominously overhead, their glow refracted into something grotesque as shadows danced, mocking my existence. Faces emerged from the gloom, a parade of tortured souls caught within the glassy black of their entrapped despair. You belong to us, they murmured, their whispers weaving tales of longing and torment, a grotesque lullaby pulling at the edges of my sanity. That I stumbled to my feet, desperate to escape, but the exit, my only sanctuary, was now shrouded in darkness, a swirling maelstrom that spouted anguished cries and invited horrors beyond my reckoning. Help me. Please. Echoed in the stillness, a fragmented voice that clawed at my heart with the pangs of familiarity. Lila. Lila. I shouted, my voice breaking, as a potent wave of regret crashed over me. Her name echoed back as an ethereal whisper, mingling with the laughter of the damned. It was wrong, so utterly wrong. Suddenly, the room shifted, revealing shadows undulating in grotesque forms, figures trapped in their plight, their faces long lost to the anguished screams that vibrated through my bones. Join us, they pleaded, extending hands that were both welcoming and grotesque, painted in a desperate palette of hopelessness. But beneath it all, a flicker of recognition pulled me toward the darkness. It wasn't just my mind fracturing in despair. I was stitched into the fabric of this horror, my very essence intertwining with the thing that had ensnared me. The visage of Lila drifted just beyond the recess of the shadows, her image both comforting and chilling. Let me go, please. I cried, tears burning the insides of my eyes as the shadows howled, tracing lines of desperation against the walls. I was caught in a nightmare, a trap of my own making. If I had simply chosen to run that night, the whole festering abyss could have been avoided. Yet again, I was ensnared by that irresistible plea. You can save me. Her voice, soft yet edged in despair, rippled through the shadows, so hauntingly familiar. Find me. I lunged forward, each shuddering step sending ripples through the thickening darkness, desperate to grasp that shimmering specter of hope. As I fought against the tide, the familiar chill washed over me, intangible yet palpable. I was not merely chased by shadows, something else stirred beneath the surface. The realization hit me with electrifying agony. I was a warden and a prisoner destined to navigate the darkness for the sake of that one flickering hope. And then it struck me, the truth that sang through the haunted chorus, that this store was more than a mere place. It was a graveyard of broken souls, reliving their final moments over and over. Each shift of light and shadow danced over the form of the malevolent spirit that had latched onto my desires, my regrets. It bided its time, hiding in the breaks of my perception, waiting to feast on my suffering. Join us, came the whispers thick with despair, a pleading symphony of souls wanting release, urging me, begging me. As panic surged through me, the noose tightened, escape now felt distant. You are one of us. They cried out, their voices mingling with memories long buried, an amalgam of laughter, fury, despair. No. I screamed, my gut twisting as claws of the past sprang forth, urging me to succumb. Not like this. But the laughter echoed with every plea, and Lila's face slipped away from me, blurring into the shadows once more. I staggered back, lost within the swallowing maw of darkness. "You cannot escape what you are," a voice resounded, a figure contorting into view, part of the shadows yet somehow tethered to me. It was me, a reflection that twisted into an image of anguished despair, woven with threads of my deepest fears. "You should never have come here," the figure rasped, its smile cruel, dripping with malice infused through despair. "You thought you could change your fate, but this is your reality and yours alone." With horror escalating into an all-consuming tempest, I watched the faces of those I had lost twist and contort, merging into one grotesque entity of dread, seeping cold hands tightening around my throat. My heart raced and desperation clawed up my throat. In that moment of total vulnerability, the souls wove around me, their energy siphoning what was left of my will. A visceral ache splintered through me. I was not just a witness, but a participant, tethered to this unending cycle of suffering because I had shared my own darkness. This was the cost of awakening the abyss. I was not merely fighting to save Lila, I had become entwined in her torment, but now I had become the very thing I sought to resist, yet, in a desperate grab for clarity, memories twisted into view, the sound of Lila's laughter before the darkness fell. The strength and the warmth of our shared moments propelled me forward, a lifeline carved in defiance against despair. "I won't give in," I bellowed, each word infused with righteous fury. "Fight!" I screamed, struggling to extricate myself from the coil tightening around my limbs, casting my thoughts toward the one flickering light that remained within that thundering darkness. "I will find you." I embraced the pain surging within, feeding off it like the very darkness that sought to consume me. As I held on to the warmth of that flicker, the oppressive shadows shivered, intertwining like veins, revealing the undulating path forged through my past. Every step I took became a deliberate reclamation of my choice. "Lila!" I shouted once more, each cry echoing like a beacon of resistance, and with that, I surged through the maelstrom, wrestling against the tide. The shadows shrieked in agony, caught unprepared as the tumult of memories transitioned, images of laughter, love, and life interlaced like a tapestry reclaiming its form. "Find me!" Lila called, her voice slipping just beyond the veil. And so I surged forth, pulling myself from the quagmire of souls still desperate to cling to the nightmare. Until the very fabric of darkness folded against my will. As I burst into the radiating light, the shadows coiled back, shrieking in a frenzy, and I found myself on the fringes of a liminal space, caught between the reality of my sins and the hope for salvation. But the haunting truth swirled like mist around me. I had awakened something deeper, something that was both an echo of my fears and the embodiment of my essence. Whatever lurked in the dark was not simply an external horror, it was born from within the very part of me I had wanted to sacrifice to save someone else, and as that chilling laughter unfurled, resounding through the corridors of my mind, I knew it was far from over. "Welcome home," the voice whispered, now echoing my very own, resonating in eternal hunger, a promise of shadows lingering just beyond the light, waiting patiently for my fall. As I stood there, light engulfing me and shadows lurking at the edges, I came to understand the true horror. I hadn't escaped. I had merely become a part of the dark symphony. And as it whispered in my ear, I sank back into the abyss, knowing in my bones that the cycle would never be broken, that the darkness would always be waiting, always hungry.